You pathetic fool. Do you honestly think you deserve a chance? You, a mere taxi driver, with your tattered dreams and your worn-out cab, daring to reach for something more? And you, a woman of means, so lost in your privilege that you'd accept charity, oblivious to the ripple of ruin you leave in your wake? The words, though unspoken by any present soul, echoed in the hollow chambers of Omar's mind. A cruel, self-inflicted monologue born of exhaustion and a lifetime of striving. They were the whispers of doubt that clung to the damp San Francisco air, mingling with the scent of diesel and the distant cries of gulls. Before we begin, tell me in the comments which city you are listening to this story from. The city of San Francisco, a mosaic of rolling hills and fog-kissed vistas, was Omar's world. Not the glittering Bay Bridge or the historic cable cars that tourists adored, but the gritty underbelly of its streets, the labyrinthine alleys, and the endless grid of traffic lights that dictated his existence. For Omar, the city was a beast, beautiful yet demanding, a constant negotiation between aspiration and the stark realities of survival. His taxi, a beat-up sedan with more miles than an astronaut, was his chariot, his office, and sometimes his confidant. Its faded yellow paint, once vibrant, now bore the scars of countless journeys, each scratch a testament to a fare earned, a dream pursued, a hope deferred. He was a man etched with the quiet dignity of one who had known hardship intimately, yet refused to let it fully define him. His hands, calloused from years gripping the steering wheel, were strong, capable hands that had also cradled his children, wiped away their tears, and gently stroked his wife's hair. His eyes, though often weary, held a deep well of kindness, a warmth that radiated even through the tired lines around them. Omar was in his late 40s, an age where the exuberance of youth had long faded, replaced by the heavy mantle of responsibility. Every sunrise brought with it the silent, pressing weight of his family's needs, the rent for their cramped apartment in the outer Sunset, the ever-increasing cost of groceries, the school supplies for his two bright children, and the medical bills for his aging mother. He carried these burdens not with complaint, but with a stoic resolve, a silent promise to those he loved that he would always find a way. This morning, however, the weight felt particularly crushing. A crucial interview awaited him, an opportunity that felt like a lifeline thrown from a distant ship. It was for a logistics manager position at a burgeoning tech company, a role that promised stability, a steady paycheck, and benefits, luxuries that felt impossibly out of reach in his current existence. The thought of exchanging the unpredictable grind of taxi driving for a desk job, a regular schedule, and the respect that came with it filled him with a potent cocktail of hope and terror. He had meticulously prepared, practiced his answers, even bought a new, albeit modest, tie. This wasn't just a job. It was an escape route, a chance to provide his family with the security they deserved, a chance to finally breathe. The central conflict was a quiet, insidious dread that gnawed at his gut. The interview was scheduled for 10:30 a.m., and the San Francisco traffic, a notorious beast, was already snarling. Each red light, each honking horn, each inchworm crawl forward felt like a personal affront, a deliberate sabotage of his future. He watched the clock on his dashboard tick relentlessly, each second a precious commodity slipping through his fingers. The stakes were immense, both immediate and far-reaching. In the short term, losing this job opportunity meant another season of scraping by, another month of anxiety-filled budgeting, another year of the soul-crushing uncertainty that came with being a taxi driver in a city designed for the privileged. Long term, it meant the erosion of his spirit, the slow death of hope, and the bitter taste of regret, knowing he had come so close to changing their lives, only to fall short. He felt it in his bones. This interview was his one shot, a singular, luminous beacon in the fog of his struggle. Missing it would be more than a professional setback. It would be a personal failure, a betrayal of the quiet trust his family placed in him, a surrender to the relentless currents of circumstance. The thought was a cold knot in his stomach, a chill that no amount of coffee could dispel. Omar adjusted his rear-view mirror, his gaze sweeping over the familiar clutter of his taxi's interior. The worn seats, the faint scent of stale coffee and countless passengers, the laminated city map on the dash that he barely needed anymore. He knew these streets better than his own reflection. The morning light, typically a golden balm, felt harsh and unforgiving today. Glinting off the perpetually wet asphalt of Market Street, he clutched the steering wheel, his knuckles white, a silent prayer forming on his lips. "Just this once," he pleaded with the universe. "Just let me get there on time." The city outside his window was a symphony of chaos. Delivery trucks rumbled past, their air brakes hissing like angry serpents. Pedestrians, a blur of motion and brightly colored umbrellas against the persistent drizzle, darted across intersections, their faces a mixture of hurried determination and resigned acceptance of the weather. Omar watched them, a fleeting envy stirring within him for their apparent lack of urgency, their freedom from the tyranny of the ticking clock. He imagined them heading to warm offices, to meetings where their futures weren't hanging by a thread, to lives where a missed appointment wasn't a catastrophic blow. He glanced at the clock again. 9:45 a.m. The interview was across town, a good 45 minutes away, even on a good day. Today was decidedly not a good day. A massive pileup on the Bay Bridge had choked the main arteries leading downtown, funneling all traffic into a slow, agonizing crawl through the already congested side streets. He had tried every shortcut, every back alley he knew, but the city, in its infinite wisdom, seemed to conspire against him. A profound sense of helplessness began to creep in, a cold tendril wrapping around his heart. He had woken before dawn, meticulously pressed his only good shirt, reviewed his resume for the 100th time, fueled by the potent promise of this one chance. To have it slip away, not because of his own inadequacy, but because of the fickle nature of traffic, felt like a cruel joke. He sighed, the sound a ragged whisper in the quiet confines of his cab. His phone buzzed, a text from his wife, Layla. "Good luck, Habibi. We're thinking of you. Don't stress." A small, sad smile touched his lips. Layla, always the anchor, always the optimist, even when their world seemed to be listing dangerously. He knew she was holding her breath too, praying for this breakthrough as fervently as he was. The thought of disappointing her, of coming home with the familiar weight of failure, was almost unbearable. He had envisioned himself returning, a triumphant glint in his eye, to tell her the good news, to see the relief flood her face. Now that vision felt like a distant, fading mirage. Suddenly, a frantic tapping on his passenger window shattered his reverie. He looked up, startled. A woman stood there, her face pale, streaked with rain, and what looked suspiciously like tears. Her dark hair was disheveled, clinging to her forehead, and her expensive-looking trench coat was soaked, draped heavily over her slender frame. She looked utterly distraught, her eyes wide with a desperate urgency that instantly registered with Omar. He instinctively unlocked the door. "Please," she gasped, her voice raw with emotion. "I need to get to St. Jude's Hospital. Immediately. It's an emergency. My mother." Her voice trailed off, choked with a sob. She didn't offer a destination, only the hospital name, as if that alone conveyed the magnitude of her distress. Omar looked at her, then at the dashboard clock. 9:55 a.m. His interview was now just 35 minutes away, and he was stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, miles from his destination. St. Jude's was in the opposite direction, a good 20-minute drive, even without traffic. Taking her would guarantee he missed his interview. The logical part of his brain screamed protests. "No, you can't. This is your life, your family's future." But something in her eyes, a raw, naked vulnerability, resonated deeply within him. He had seen that look before, in the mirror, in the faces of his loved ones during moments of crisis. It was the look of someone utterly lost, utterly helpless, reaching out for any flicker of light. He took a deep breath, the scent of rain and desperation filling his nostrils. The logical part of his brain quieted, replaced by an older, more fundamental instinct. The instinct to help, to offer solace, to ease another's suffering. It was an impulse that had always guided him, sometimes to his detriment, but always true to his core. "Get in," he said, his voice softer than he intended. The decision made before he could fully process its implications. He watched as she practically fell into the back seat, her body trembling. He saw her fumble for her purse, but he raised a hand. "Don't worry about it," he told her, his gaze meeting hers briefly in the rearview mirror. "It's on me. Just tell me which entrance you need." He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he had just sacrificed his one shot. The weight of that knowledge was immense, a heavy stone settling in his gut. But beneath it, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark of something else flickered, a quiet sense of rightness, of having chosen the human path. Isabella, for that was her name, was a whirlwind of controlled panic. She sat hunched in the back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her hands, delicate and adorned with a simple silver ring, twisted a damp tissue into a shredded mess. The hospital, a monolithic structure of beige brick and tinted glass, loomed ahead, a beacon of both hope and dread. Every street corner they rounded, every block they traversed, felt like an eternity. Omar, despite the gnawing anxiety about his own rapidly diminishing prospects, focused entirely on the road, his driving both swift and measured, weaving through traffic with an almost surgical precision born of years navigating these chaotic streets. He was acutely aware of the precious minutes ticking away, not just for his own fate, but for whatever crisis awaited Isabella at St. Jude's. He could hear her muffled whimpers from the back seat, punctuated by strained attempts to catch her breath. The air in the cab, usually filled with the low hum of the radio or the mundane chatter of passengers, was thick with silent, shared tension. He stole glances at her in the rearview mirror. Her face, still pale, seemed to hold the fragile beauty of a wilting flower. Her eyes, though swollen from tears, held an intensity that spoke of a deep, unwavering love for whomever she was rushing to see. He wondered about her life, about the circumstances that had brought her to his taxi in such a state. Was it a parent? A child? The universal pain of impending loss hung heavy in the air, a silent testament to the fragility of human existence. He felt a profound, almost paternal protectiveness towards her, a stranger in his care. "We're almost there," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble, hoping to offer some small measure of comfort. He took a sharp turn, the tires squealing softly on the wet pavement, pushing the old sedan to its limits without compromising safety. "Which entrance?" "Emergency," she managed, her voice barely a whisper, a fresh wave of tears springing to her eyes. "My mother. She had a stroke. Early this morning. They just called." Omar nodded, his heart aching for her. A stroke. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. He knew the devastating swiftness of such an event, the way it could turn a life upside down in an instant. His own mother had suffered a minor one years ago, and the memory of that fear, that helplessness, was still raw. He pressed harder on the accelerator, navigating the final few blocks with a renewed sense of urgency. The thought of his interview, which had been a suffocating weight moments before, now receded slightly, eclipsed by the immediate, tangible need of the woman behind him. He pulled up to the emergency entrance, the flashing red and blue lights of an ambulance, just arriving, painting the scene with a surreal, urgent glow. Orderlies in scrubs moved with practiced efficiency, their faces grim. Isabella didn't wait for him to fully stop. She fumbled with the door handle, practically leaping out before the car had completely halted, her trench coat flapping around her like a distressed bird's wings. "Thank you," she cried out, turning back for a fleeting moment, her eyes meeting his. In that instant, he saw not just gratitude, but a flicker of something else. Recognition, perhaps, or a deep, unspoken understanding. Then she was gone, swallowed by the imposing automatic doors of the hospital, disappearing into the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of suffering and hope. Omar watched her go, a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. Relief that he had gotten her there, a quiet satisfaction in having helped. But beneath it, the cold, hard reality of his own situation began to reassert itself. He looked at the dashboard clock. 10:18 a.m. His interview was in 12 minutes, and he was still miles away, in the wrong part of the city, with no time to spare. He was undeniably, irrevocably late. A profound sigh escaped him, a sound laden with the weight of disappointment, of a future that had just slipped through his fingers. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the worn plastic. His throat tightened, a lump forming that made it difficult to swallow. The air, which had felt charged with Isabella's distress, now seemed empty, leaving behind only the bitter taste of what might have been. He could feel the familiar ache of failure beginning to bloom in his chest, a slow, spreading chill. He knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he wouldn't make it. Even if he drove like a madman, even if the traffic magically cleared, he would arrive breathless, disheveled, and utterly unprofessional. The opportunity, the one he had pinned so much hope on, was gone. Just like that, a random encounter, a moment of human kindness, had cost him everything. The irony was a cruel twist in his gut. He had prided himself on his reliability, his punctuality, his unwavering dedication. Yet, in the very act of upholding a deeper value, he had sabotaged his professional future. He slowly pulled away from the hospital curb, the ambulance sirens fading into the background. The city, which had felt like an adversary moments ago, now seemed indifferent, its ceaseless rhythm continuing without him. He drove aimlessly for a few minutes, the weight of his missed opportunity pressing down on him, suffocating him. He pictured the HR manager, perhaps already sitting at their desk, tapping their fingers impatiently, wondering why Omar wasn't there. He imagined the professional, polished candidates who would be there, ready to seize the chance he had forfeited. A wave of regret, sharp and piercing, washed over him. What would he tell Layla? How would he explain that the one chance, the beacon of hope, had been extinguished by a spontaneous act of generosity? He knew she wouldn't blame him. She would understand. He had wanted so desperately to lift that burden from her shoulders, to give her and their children a sense of security. Now it felt heavier than ever. The San Francisco fog, which had been lurking on the horizon, began to roll in, a thick gray blanket descending upon the city, mirroring the gloom that had settled in Omar's heart. It swirled around his taxi, obscuring the familiar landmarks, making the world feel small and confining. He pulled over to the side of a quiet street, parking beneath the skeletal branches of a gnarled oak tree. He leaned his head back against the worn headrest, closing his eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath. The silence of the parked car was a stark contrast to the city's usual cacophony, a silence that amplified the frantic beating of his own heart, the turmoil in his mind. He thought of his children, 10-year-old Sammy and 7-year-old Noor, their bright, eager faces. Sammy, with his dreams of becoming an engineer, always tinkering with discarded electronics. Noor, a budding artist, whose drawings adorned their refrigerator door. He wanted to provide them with more than just basic necessities. He wanted to give them opportunities, a foundation for their own dreams, a life free from the constant shadow of financial worry. This job, this logistics manager position, had represented that foundation. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid, dependable. And now it was gone. A profound sense of injustice began to fester within him. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? He had helped someone in genuine distress, prioritizing a human life over a personal ambition. Was that not what decent people did? Yet the world, in its cold, calculating way, seemed to punish kindness. It was a bitter pill to swallow, a fundamental unfairness that pricked at the edges of his usually resilient spirit. He had always believed in the inherent goodness of people, in the idea that doing right would eventually lead to right outcomes. But today, that belief felt shaken, fragile. He stared out the window, watching the fog swallow the distant skyline. The Golden Gate Bridge, usually a vibrant slash of orange against the blue, was now a ghostly silhouette, barely visible through the swirling mist. It felt like a metaphor for his own life, once clear and hopeful, now shrouded in uncertainty, its path obscured. He imagined the HR director calling the next candidate, moving on without a second thought, his name a forgotten entry on a long list. He was just another missed appointment, another statistic in the city's relentless churn. The regret was a physical ache, a dull throb behind his eyes. He replayed the moment he had seen Isabella, her desperate plea. Could he have driven past? Could he have said no? The thought was repulsive. No, he couldn't have. His conscience wouldn't have allowed it. He was Omar, a man who, despite his own struggles, always found a way to lend a hand, to offer a moment of comfort. It was his nature, an intrinsic part of who he was. But today, that nature had exacted a heavy toll. He thought of the sacrifices Layla had made, working tirelessly at the small bakery, stretching every dollar, managing their meager budget with an almost magical efficiency. He remembered her tired smile when he came home late, her quiet strength that never faltered. He had wanted to give her a break, to tell her to work fewer hours, to finally relax. The image of her face, etched with worry, now haunted him. He closed his eyes again, willing the knot in his stomach to loosen, willing the despair to recede. It was a futile effort. The disappointment was a heavy cloak, wrapping itself around him, chilling him to the bone. He knew he couldn't stay parked forever. The meter was running, though he barely cared at this point. He had to face the day, face Layla, face the renewed challenge of making ends meet. He started the engine, the familiar rumble a small comfort in the vast silence of his despair. He decided to head back towards his usual routes, to pick up whatever fares he could, to try and salvage something from the wreckage of his morning. The city awaited, indifferent and demanding, and Omar, the taxi driver, had no choice but to answer its call. He was a survivor, after all. He had faced setbacks before, but this one, this particular blow, felt different. It felt like a direct hit to the heart of his hope. The afternoon wore on, a blur of anonymous faces and short rides. Each passenger was a fleeting encounter, a brief echo of a life intersecting with his own, before disappearing into the urban tapestry. He drove on autopilot, his mind a turbulent sea of what-ifs and self-recrimination. He tried to focus on the road, on the traffic, on the next fare, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the missed interview, the vacant chair, the silent judgment of an unfulfilled promise. The sun had broken through the fog by late afternoon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the city. But its warmth did little to penetrate the coldness that had settled within Omar. He picked up an elderly woman carrying a basket of vibrant flowers, their fragrance momentarily filling the cab with a sweet, earthy perfume. She spoke of her ailing husband, of bringing him a touch of beauty in his hospital room. Omar listened, a pang of empathy stirring within him, a reminder of Isabella and her urgent dash to St. Jude's. He wondered if her mother was all right, if his small act of kindness had made a difference. The thought brought a faint, fleeting sense of solace. A tiny pinprick of light in the overwhelming darkness of his disappointment. But it wasn't enough to erase the sting of his own sacrifice. Later, he found himself driving past the very building where his interview was supposed to have taken place. It was a sleek, modern structure of glass and steel, gleaming in the late afternoon sun, a monument to corporate success. He slowed down, his gaze drawn upwards, towards the floor where he imagined in the logistics department resided. He pictured the bustling offices, the people moving with purpose, the energy of a thriving enterprise. He could have been a part of that. He could have been contributing, growing, building a more secure future. The sight was a fresh wound, twisting the knife of regret deeper into his heart. He quickly sped up, unable to bear the sight, the stark reminder of what he had lost. He returned home that evening, the heavy scent of diesel clinging to his clothes, his shoulders slumped with a weariness that went beyond the physical. Layla met him at the door, her eyes searching his. He didn't need to say anything. The answer was etched on his face, in the slump of his posture, in the defeated silence that filled the small apartment. She simply nodded, her hand reaching out to gently squeeze his arm. Her touch was a balm, a quiet understanding that bypassed words. "Habibi," she murmured, her voice soft, "it's okay. We'll be okay." But her eyes, though kind, held a flicker of the same disappointment he felt, a reflection of their shared burden. He saw his children peeking out from the living room, their faces falling slightly as they sensed the heavy atmosphere. He forced a smile, a shaky, unconvincing effort. "Hey, my little ones," he said, trying to inject some cheer into his voice. "How was school?" Sammy and Noor, sensing his sadness, came to him, hugging his legs. Their innocent embrace was a bittersweet comfort, a reminder of why he fought so hard, and why the loss of this opportunity felt so crushing. He held them close, burying his face in their soft hair, inhaling the familiar scent of childhood. He wanted to shield them from the harsh realities of their financial struggles, to create a bubble of security around them. But the world, it seemed, had other plans. The night was long and restless. Omar lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The city's distant hum, a constant reminder of his waking nightmare. He replayed the day's events over and over, searching for an alternative path, a different choice he could have made. But each time, he arrived at the same conclusion. He couldn't have abandoned Isabella. His moral compass simply wouldn't allow it. It was a conflict between his personal values and his material needs, and in that moment of crisis, his values had won. But the victory felt hollow, steeped in the bitter aftertaste of sacrifice. He thought of the countless times he had helped strangers throughout his years as a taxi driver. The lost tourists, the elderly woman who forgot her purse, the young couple stranded after a late-night concert. He had always offered a hand, a kind word, a free ride if needed. It was part of his unspoken code, a way of navigating the complexities of urban life with a shred of humanity. But never before had it cost him so dearly. Never before had it felt like such a direct blow to his family's well-being. The next few days were a blur of routine. Omar drove his taxi, picking up fares, navigating the familiar streets, but his heart wasn't in it. The usual banter with passengers felt forced. His smiles felt hollow. He felt a profound sense of exhaustion, not just physical, but emotional. The weight of his unfulfilled potential pressed down on him, making every movement feel heavy, every thought tinged with regret. He found himself staring blankly at the traffic, his mind drifting to alternate realities where he had made it to the interview, where he was now preparing for a new, stable career. Layla, ever observant, tried to cheer him up. She cooked his favorite meals, brought him cups of strong, sweet tea, and listened patiently as he recounted the day's small frustrations. She didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions, simply her unwavering presence, her quiet strength. Her silent support was a lifeline, preventing him from sinking deeper into despair. He knew he was lucky to have her, a partner who understood the unspoken language of his heart. One evening, as he was cleaning out the back of his cab, he found a small, intricately carved silver pendant nestled between the cracks of the seat. It was delicate, beautiful, clearly expensive. He recognized it instantly. It was Isabella's. It must have fallen off her neck during her frantic dash to the hospital. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over him. He felt a fleeting annoyance, another distraction, another responsibility. But then a deeper sense of obligation took hold. He couldn't just keep it. It was hers, a personal item, probably with sentimental value. He remembered her distraught face, her raw vulnerability. He had to return it. But how? He didn't have her name, her phone number. Nothing but the memory of her face and the hospital she had rushed into. St. Jude's. It was a long shot, but he felt compelled. He couldn't let it go. It was a small, tangible link to the decision that had altered his life. A silent testament to the moment of kindness that had cost him so much. Perhaps, in returning it, he could find some small measure of closure, some justification for his sacrifice. Or perhaps it was just another futile gesture in a string of unfortunate events. He wasn't sure. All he knew was that he couldn't just throw it away. The next morning, after dropping off Sami and Noor at school, Omar found himself driving towards St. Jude's Hospital once again. The thought of walking into the vast, impersonal institution. Asking about a woman he only vaguely remembered felt daunting, almost absurd. But the pendant, nestled in his palm, felt surprisingly heavy, a small anchor pulling him forward. He parked his taxi in the visitor's lot, the familiar beige brick of the hospital looming over him. The air felt thick with the unspoken stories of illness and recovery, of life and death. He walked into the bustling lobby, a maze of corridors and waiting areas filled with anxious faces. The scent of antiseptic and stale coffee hung heavy in the air. He approached the information desk, a stern-faced woman with tightly pulled-back hair looking up at him expectantly. "Excuse me," Omar began, feeling a flush creep up his neck. "I know this is a long shot, but I'm a taxi driver, and a few days ago I drove a woman here in an emergency. She was in a lot of distress. She might have lost this in my cab." He held out the silver pendant, its delicate filigree catching the fluorescent light. The woman raised an eyebrow, her expression unyielding. "Sir, we cannot give out patient information. It's against hospital policy." "I understand," Omar said, his voice laced with desperation. "But she seemed very upset. Her mother had a stroke. I just want to return this. It looks important to her." He tried to convey the urgency, the emotional weight of the item. The woman softened slightly, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "I can't tell you anything, but I can take the pendant and leave it at the main desk. If she comes looking for it, we can identify it. What's your name in case she asks?" Omar hesitated. Giving his name felt like an unnecessary step, a lingering attachment to a moment he was trying to put behind him. But then he remembered Isabella's face, her tear-streaked eyes. He owed it to her. Omar Hassan. He handed over the pendant, feeling a strange mix of relief and emptiness. He had done his part. The silver glinted in the woman's hand for a moment, before she placed it in a small, clear plastic bag. "We'll hold on to it," she promised, her voice a little kinder now. As Omar turned to leave, a wave of profound disappointment washed over him. He had hoped for something more, perhaps a simple acknowledgement, a word of thanks, anything to validate his sacrifice. But there was nothing, just the sterile efficiency of the hospital, the endless flow of strangers, and the lingering sense of his own insignificance. He walked out into the bright San Francisco morning, the city's relentless energy feeling particularly jarring against his subdued mood. The pendant was gone, but the emptiness in his heart remained, heavier than before. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with its consequences. The hope of the logistics manager position, which had burned so brightly just days ago, was now nothing but cold ash. He got back into his taxi, the familiar worn seats feeling like a cage. He was just a taxi driver after all. Nothing more, nothing less. The world had moved on, and so must he. Tell me in the comments which city you are listening to this story from. Like and share with someone who loves emotional stories. Days bled into a week into two. The initial sting of missing the interview had dulled into a persistent, throbbing ache, a dull thrum beneath the surface of Omar's everyday life. He continued his routes, the familiar urban landscape a backdrop to his internal struggle. He found himself constantly scanning the streets, an unconscious hope that he might spot Isabella, might see a flicker of recognition, a chance for closure. But the city, in its vast indifference, offered no such solace. Each passing yellow cab, each blur of faces on the sidewalk, was a reminder of the anonymity that both defined and confined his existence. The silver pendant, now a memory, felt like a symbol of his lost opportunity, a small, beautiful object that had slipped through his fingers, just like his dreams. He tried to bury himself in work, driving longer hours, taking on more shifts, hoping that sheer exhaustion would numb the disappointment. But the quiet moments, the late-night drives when the city slept and his cab was bathed in the soft glow of the dashboard lights, were the hardest. That's when the self-recrimination crept in, insidious and relentless. He questioned his judgment, his compassion, his very character. Was he a fool? Had he been naive to believe that doing the right thing would somehow lead to a positive outcome? His father, a pragmatic man who had instilled in him the value of hard work and self-reliance, had always warned him against letting emotion cloud judgment. And here he was, facing the consequences of a decision driven purely by empathy. Layla, bless her heart, maintained her quiet strength. But Omar could see the worry etched deeper into her beautiful face. Her late-night sighs, the way she clutched the grocery receipts, the unspoken calculations in her eyes, they were all silent testaments to the renewed financial strain that now shadowed their lives. He felt a profound sense of guilt, an intense desire to erase the worry from her features, to restore the easy laughter that had once filled their home. He tried to engage Sammy and Noor in their studies, to play with them, to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But his mind was often elsewhere, lost in the labyrinth of his own regrets. He saw the children's innocent eyes on him, sensing his quiet despair, and it pricked his heart. He was supposed to be their rock, their unwavering pillar of strength. Instead, he felt like crumbling. One particularly gray, drizzly afternoon, Omar was parked near Golden Gate Park, waiting for a fare, sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos. The world outside his window was a muted watercolor, the trees dripping, the grass a vibrant, almost unnatural green. He was replaying a recent conversation with Layla, a hushed discussion about how they might cut back further, perhaps forego the children's summer camp this year. The thought twisted his gut. It was a small sacrifice, perhaps, but one that felt monumental, chipping away at the small joys they managed to carve out of their difficult lives. Suddenly, his phone, usually a reliable source of mundane fare requests, buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He hesitated, almost ignoring it, assuming it was a telemarketer. But something, a flicker of intuition, prompted him to answer. "Hello?" he said, his voice flat, weary. "Is this Omar Hassan?" a woman's voice asked, clear and professional, yet with a familiar underlying warmth. Omar's heart gave a strange lurch. He knew that voice. He just couldn't place it immediately. "Yes, this is Omar." "Mr. Hassan, my name is Isabella Rossi. We met a couple of weeks ago. You drove me to St. Jude's Hospital." A bolt of electricity shot through Omar. Isabella. The woman. His mind raced, 1,000 questions flooding his thoughts. How did she get his number? Why was she calling? Was her mother okay? A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his hand as he gripped the phone. "Ms. Rossi," he replied, his voice a little stronger now, a spark of cautious curiosity igniting within him. "Yes, I remember. Is everything all right? Your mother?" "My mother is recovering," Isabella said, a note of profound relief in her voice. "It was touch and go for a while, but she's stable now, and the prognosis is good, thanks in no small part to you, Mr. Hassan, for getting me there so quickly." Omar felt a small, unexpected warmth spread through his chest, a sense of validation, a quiet confirmation that his sacrifice had not been entirely in vain. "I'm glad to hear that," he said genuinely. "I found your pendant, by the way. I dropped it off at the hospital information desk." "Yes, I know," Isabella replied, a soft laugh in her voice. They told me, "It was so kind of you. But that's not why I'm calling, Mr. Hassan. Not entirely. I did some asking around. When you gave me that ride, I was so distraught. I barely registered anything beyond the immediate emergency. But I remember your kindness. And I remembered you wouldn't let me pay. I felt awful about it, so I tried to find a way to track you down. It wasn't easy, but I found out you're an independent driver, and the hospital staff remembered your visit about the pendant. One of the nurses, a lovely woman named Maria, remembered your name from when you gave her a lift once and was able to connect the dots to your company registration through the taxi commission." Omar listened, a mix of bewilderment and a strange sense of anticipation building within him. This was far more than he had expected. He had simply expected a thank you, maybe. This was something else entirely. "I also found out," Isabella continued, her voice taking on a more formal, yet still gentle, tone, "that you had an interview scheduled on the same day, at the same time you were driving me, for a logistics manager position at Integratech." Omar froze. His breath hitched in his throat. The words hung in the air, impossibly heavy, impossibly significant. His mind reeled. How could she possibly know that? The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. "Mr. Hassan," Isabella said, her voice now softer, more deliberate. "I am the HR director at Integratech." The world tilted. The coffee cup slipped from his grasp, clattering against the dashboard, spilling its contents across the worn plastic. Omar stared blankly ahead, the drizzly park outside his window blurring into an indistinct smear of greens and grays. The revelation hit him with the force of a physical blow, simultaneously stunning and exhilarating. The woman he had helped, the stranger for whom he had sacrificed his future, was the very person who held his future in her hands. The irony, once a bitter twist, was now a breathtaking, almost unbelievable turn of events. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. You're the HR director?" he managed to stammer, the words feeling alien on his tongue. He could feel a flush creeping up his neck, a mix of embarrassment and an overwhelming, nascent hope. "Yes," Isabella confirmed, a note of quiet amusement in her voice, as if she understood the profound impact of her words. "Isabella Rossi, and I was the one scheduled to interview you that morning." A gasp escaped Omar's lips. The full weight of the coincidence, the sheer cosmic improbability of it all, settled upon him. He remembered the HR manager he had pictured, tapping her fingers, judging his absence. And it had been her. The woman he had left stranded in his cab. The woman whose desperate plea had overridden his own ambition. The universe, it seemed, had a darkly humorous, incredibly intricate way of orchestrating destiny. He couldn't speak, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, disbelief, a profound sense of irony, and then, slowly, tentatively, a fragile bloom of hope. "Mr. Hassan," Isabella continued, her voice gentle, "I understand that you missed your interview because you were helping me. And while punctuality is important, I believe that integrity, compassion, and a willingness to put others first are even more valuable qualities in an employee, especially in a leadership role within logistics, where unforeseen circumstances and quick ethical decision-making are paramount." Omar's breath caught in his throat. He felt a prickle behind his eyes, a sudden overwhelming surge of emotion. This wasn't just a thank you. This was something far greater. "I observed your actions firsthand," Isabella went on, her voice gaining a quiet intensity. "Your calm demeanor, your efficiency, your genuine concern for a complete stranger in distress. These are not qualities one can teach in an interview. They are intrinsic. And they are precisely the qualities we look for in our team at Integratech. A tear, hot and unexpected, escaped Omar's eye, tracing a path down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away, embarrassed by the sudden vulnerability. He was a man who rarely cried, who had learned to absorb life's blows with stoic resilience. But this unexpected turn of fate was too much. It was the lifting of a burden he hadn't realized was crushing him so completely. "So," Isabella concluded, her voice now firm and decisive, "I'd like to offer you the logistics manager position, Mr. Hassan. No interview necessary." Your actions that day spoke louder than any resume or prepared answer ever could. Omar couldn't believe his ears. The words so long imagined, so desperately desired, were finally being spoken, not as a dream, but as a tangible reality. The weight that had pressed down on him for weeks, the despair that had clouded his vision, lifted in an instant, replaced by a lightness he hadn't felt in years. He felt dizzy, overwhelmed, as if the very air around him had suddenly become charged with possibility. "Miss Rossi," he finally managed to croak, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. I'm speechless." Isabella chuckled softly. "You don't need to say anything, Mr. Hassan. Just tell me if you accept." "Yes," Omar exclaimed, the word bursting forth from him with an almost childlike enthusiasm. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Miss Rossi." "Please, call me Isabella," she corrected gently. "And the gratitude is mine, Omar. You truly saved my day, and potentially my mother's life. This is the least I can do." They discussed the details of the offer, the start date, the salary, the benefits, all the things that had once felt like an impossible dream. Omar listened, his mind still reeling, but a deep sense of peace began to settle over him. The financial strain, the nagging worry, the fear of disappointing his family, all of it began to recede, replaced by a radiant, almost blinding hope. This was it. This was the change he had so desperately sought, the stability he had craved. And it had come to him not through cunning or ambition, but through a simple, spontaneous act of human kindness. He hung up the phone, his hand still trembling, a wide, almost foolish grin spreading across his face. He looked at the coffee stain on his dashboard, a small, insignificant detail now. The world outside his window, once a muted watercolor of despair, now seemed to burst with vibrant color, each raindrop on the glass sparkling like a diamond. The fog, which had mirrored his internal gloom, now seemed to be lifting, revealing a clear, brilliant sky. He started the engine, the familiar rumble of his old taxi sounding different now, almost triumphant. He was still a taxi driver, for a little while longer, but he was also something more. He was a man who had chosen compassion over self-interest, and in doing so, had opened the door to an unexpected, incredible future. He couldn't wait to tell Layla, to see the relief flood her face, to tell Sammy and Noor that their summer camp was back on, that their dreams, too, were now within closer reach. The feeling was intoxicating, a powerful surge of hope that coursed through every fiber of his being. The city, which had once felt like an adversary, now seemed to hum with a benevolent energy, a silent witness to his transformation. He drove, not towards another fair, but towards home, towards the bright, shining promise of a new beginning. The transformation was not instantaneous, but a gradual unfolding, like a desert flower after a long-awaited rain. Omar Ahabohum, a grin still plastered on his face, his eyes shining with an uncharacteristic brilliance. Layla, ever perceptive, took one look at him and knew. The questions, the fears, the unspoken anxieties that had burdened them both for weeks dissolved in the face of his radiant joy. "Habibi," she whispered, her own heart quickening. "What is it?" "She called, Layla," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Isabella, she's the HR director. She offered me the job, the logistics manager position. She offered it to me." For a moment, Layla simply stared, her mind struggling to process the enormity of his words. Then, a slow, dawning smile spread across her face, followed by a choked sob of relief. She rushed into his arms, burying her face in his chest, her body trembling. He held her tight, feeling the warmth of her tears against his shirt, a tangible release of weeks of pent-up worry and fear. Sammy and Noor, drawn by the unusual display of emotion, cautiously approached. "What's happening?" Sammy asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Omar knelt, pulling them both into a tight embrace, Layla still clinging to his side. "Papa got a new job, my little ones," he announced, his voice thick with unadulterated happiness. "A good job. A job that will make things easier for all of us." Noor, her eyes wide, gasped, "Does that mean we can still go to summer camp?" Omar laughed, a rich, booming sound that had been absent from their home for far too long. "Yes, my little artist, it means you can go to summer camp. And Sammy, my little engineer, you can get those new books you wanted." The children erupted in cheers, their joy infectious, echoing through the small apartment, chasing away the lingering shadows of hardship. That evening, their dinner table, usually a quiet affair, was filled with animated chatter, with plans and dreams, with a renewed sense of hope that felt almost palpable. Omar watched his family, his heart swelling with a profound gratitude. He had chosen kindness, and kindness, in a miraculous twist of fate, had chosen him back. The next few days were a flurry of activity. Omar spent hours cleaning his taxi, preparing it for its final drives. Each wipe of the cloth, each polish of the chrome, felt like a farewell, a loving homage to the vehicle that had been his livelihood, his burden, and ultimately, his silent partner in this unexpected journey. He sold it to a younger driver, a new immigrant just starting out, offering him a fair price and a few words of seasoned advice. Handing over the keys felt symbolic, the closing of one chapter and the eager anticipation of another. His first day at Integratech arrived, bright and clear, a stark contrast to the drizzly, fog-laden day of his missed interview. He dressed in his new, crisp shirt, the knot of his tie perfectly symmetrical. He felt a nervous flutter in his stomach, a mix of excitement and the natural apprehension of stepping into the unknown. But beneath it all lay a bedrock of quiet confidence, born of his recent ordeal. He knew he deserved this, not just because of Isabella's generosity, but because of the character he had demonstrated. He arrived at the sleek, modern Integratech building, the same one he had driven past with such a heavy heart just weeks before. This time, as he walked through the gleaming lobby, he felt a sense of belonging, a quiet pride. He was no longer just an observer, he was a participant. The air conditioning hummed, a soothing contrast to the constant drone of this taxi engine. The scent of fresh coffee and new technology filled the spacious corridors. Isabella met him at the reception, her smile warm and genuine. She looked different now, not the distraught woman in a rain-soaked trench coat, but a confident, poised professional, her dark hair impeccably styled, her eyes sparkling with intelligent warmth. "Omar," she greeted, extending a hand. Welcome to Integratech. I'm so glad you're here. He shook her hand, her grip firm and reassuring. Thank you, Isabella, for everything. I'm truly grateful. She led him through the bustling offices, past cubicles filled with focused employees, past meeting rooms where animated discussions were taking place. The energy was palpable, invigorating. He felt a surge of excitement, a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. This was a place of growth, of innovation, of opportunity, and he was now a part of it. They reached his new office, a bright, functional space with a large window overlooking the city. A desk, a computer, a stack of orientation materials. It was all there, waiting for him. He sat down, running a hand over the smooth surface of the desk, a silent acknowledgement of the journey that had led him here. Your team is excited to meet you, Isabella said, her voice warm. I've told them a bit about your background and your unique path to us. They're looking forward to your leadership. Omar looked at her, his heart full. I won't let you down, Isabella, he promised, his voice earnest. She smiled, a knowing, compassionate smile. I know you won't, Omar. I never doubted it. As Isabella left him to settle in, Omar sat at his new desk, gazing out at the sweeping panorama of San Francisco. The city, once a source of endless struggle and quiet despair, now shimmered with possibility. The Bay Bridge, visible in the distance, no longer looked like an insurmountable barrier, but a graceful arc connecting him to a brighter future. The fog, a symbol of his past gloom, was nowhere in sight, replaced by a boundless expanse of clear blue sky. He thought of the taxi, of the countless hours spent navigating these streets, of the random encounter that had changed everything. It was a story of choices, of consequences, and of the unexpected grace that can emerge when one chooses kindness, even at great personal cost. He had lost a job opportunity, yes, but he had gained something far more valuable, a confirmation of his own humanity, and a profound, life-altering second chance. He took a deep breath, the air in his new office fresh and clean, devoid of the lingering scent of diesel. He felt ready. Ready to learn, ready to lead, ready to embrace this new chapter with gratitude and unwavering hope. The journey had been long, winding, and often heartbreaking, but it had led him exactly where he was meant to be. Thank you for making it to the end. If this emotionally explosive narrative left you breathless and forever transformed, like now and share immediately with someone who loves life-changing tales before everyone misses this bombshell. Tell me in the comments which city you are listening to this story from.